Welcome back to Following Noadon, a Stormlight podcast. This week is episode 104, and we are doing chapters 9, 10, and 11 of Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. Paul, how are you?
Excellent. Good to be back. Still glad to be in Rhythm of War.
Great. Elliot?
I'm good. I feel like this first part of Rhythm of War is actually going quite quickly. We are already a chunk of the way into the book, and things have been moving fast. So it's been a fast start.
It has been a fast start. We have several things to talk about this week, even though only 3 chapters. We've got 4 or even 4 different point of views to talk about over 3 chapters. So without further ado, 2 words to summarize this episode. We'll start with Elliot.
For these 3 chapters, I have freedom and captivity.
Freedom and captivity. And Paul?
For me, I have hierarchy and systems.
Okay. Hierarchy, systems, freedom, and captivity. Let's use these 4 words and talk about Rhythm of War. So you want to talk about your 2 words?
I would love to. My 2 words are actually a bit different. My words have always applied to specifically story elements that we're talking about, but this time it's a little bit different. It's more so about themes or things that I anticipate we're going to talk about. Looking a little bit at our outline here, I put hierarchy because we get a good description of our different kinds of fused or Parshendi with the fused regals, listeners, singers, like all this stuff. And I thought that was kind of a good word to summarize that. And then another thing which I'm really curious to see is systems. And I put this because we kind of get a mention of our Cosmere systems, like Nalthis and Scadrial. I think they may be by different names. But basically that's what it's for. There's a mention of that which had me really curious to see, are we going to actually learn about that some from this book? Or is that all just the Arcanum Unbounded content? So it's got my interest peaked.
Yeah, we will retouch on all of that here in a second. But Elliot, go ahead.
My 2 words are pretty obviously tied together: freedom and captivity. I kind of tied in some of the story points we hit across the 3 chapters here. Navani is getting some cryptic messages about how they are capturing Spren and using them, and almost sort of a threat or a warning to stop doing that. And then Kaladin is the most interesting here. I'm sure we're going to talk about this for quite a bit here. Kaladin gets freed from his duty to the military, but it's, in a way, I don't know. Is it freedom? Is it going to be almost more of a captivity for him to be held away from the battle? We'll talk about it, I'm sure. And then Venli, I really enjoyed chapter 11 with Venli quite a bit, because it's starting to kind of let us get a glimpse into what her story might be here, what her role, where she's going, what she's trying to do, motives, those kinds of things. It seems like her prime motive, her goal, is to free the singers from the oppression of the fused. She doesn't like the fused kind of get all the say. And they claim they're doing it for the singer's benefit, but are they really? That kind of thing. So I appreciated kind of understanding Venli's goals here, which seem to kind of revolve around this: she wants freedom for her people.
Yeah, all really good stuff. I'm glad you enjoyed chapter 11. That's our first Venli point of view chapter, and we'll be certainly getting more of her in the future. But chapter 9, it starts with Kaladin, starts the point of view of Kaladin, which is just after the Moash scene from last week. Moash has planted the seed in Kaladin's mind that it doesn't matter how hard you try, you are going to lose everyone. And Kaladin is visibly shook. He gets back onto the fourth bridge on his way back to the Shattered Plains, and everybody clearly sees that, oh, he's not okay. He gets offered water like a dozen times by a dozen different people. They are like, here's some Stormlight. You don't look well. And so they keep trying to fix all of his problems and shove anything that might help next to him. And Teft seems to be the only one that, or the one that successfully gets to sit down and talk to Kaladin. And Kaladin snaps at him and says, "Hey, I don't want to talk. Do not sit next to me." And Teft says, "I don't care. We're going to talk." And sits down and gives him a quick little talk about the state of the Windrunners. So what did you guys think of the beginning of chapter 9?
I related with a little bit, kind of at the beginning, where I know I've definitely had those days where like people just keep coming up to you and like, "Elliot, are you doing okay today?" It's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." Like, what's wrong? Go away. And then finally, when like the 10th person has done it, you're like, "Wait, am I fine? Like, what's going on? Am I clearly not okay? Do I look tired or something like that?" So I related with Kaladin there a little bit, but it tells you so much that he has so many people around him that care, right? That are going to actually come up to him and try and take care of him the way he is always taking care of all those around him. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, so my big question going into this week and all the weeks forward, honestly, right now, is how is Moash's big, I don't know what you call it, emotional, mental attack on Kaladin, what's that going to result in? And I think we're kind of seeing it a little bit. Like, I don't think this is like oh my goodness, this is the end of Kaladin's internal struggle with Moash. I definitely don't think that's the case.
Right.
But we definitely see that things are wearing on him. And people start to notice, like, Kaladin, I think, also prides himself on, like, kind of not really wearing his heart on his sleeve too much. I could be wrong on that, but that's like the impression I've had, is that Kaladin isn't forthcoming really with his problems or pain and stuff like that. And so for people to notice, I think is kind of maybe it's worse for him than he thought, or than most people would think.
He understands the need to have someone to be able to talk to, and so he's going to be there for everybody else, and he's not going to take care of that for himself. And everybody realizes, especially right in this scene, that he needs that for himself, whether Kaladin realizes that or not. So he's too outwardly focused at the moment. We'll revisit this in chapter 10. I will probably talk a long time about chapter 10. Through chapter 9, we go to Navani, who is in her space hover sphere orb. What do you guys think of her little flying airship thing that gets lashed across the sky?
I read this and I was like, oh my goodness, this is neat. I can't wait to hear Elliot explain it to me. So it makes more sense, you know?
I thought it was awesome. I thought it was super cool. I had to wear my aerospace engineering shirt today for this little airship that she's flying in. I could do a really long tangent about the engineering behind this, but I think it's actually pretty irrelevant to the story here. So I'm going to hold it. I'm going to keep in the bank my engineering chips here, and I'm going to cash them in later on, because I'm willing to bet we're going to find something more fun, Fabrial-esque that we can do. This thing is fairly simple. It's just a wooden box that's getting lashed through the air. The fins are probably the most interesting part of it, actually. The fact that they realized that they had to put fins on it to keep it stable. I could talk for a bit explaining why that's important to keep the center of pressure behind your center of gravity, but I'm gonna hold on to it. I'm gonna keep it inside. Go Google stuff if you have to know.
I actually did spend a good amount of time thinking about this because if there's 4 fins in my head, that it would spin like a whatever, like maybe a football, but it's actually the you can get into it of why that's not the case, but
it's still cool. I love the little spaceship that she's flying in. I did also. I like this section with Navani as she kind of tries to unravel some things as well. She's got the Stormlight blocking Fabrial with her, the one that Kaladin just encountered in battle, and it drained him of his abilities, and he had to fight that new fused guy without his powers. And Navani notices that this thing looks kind of like that pillar that's back in Urithiru, that gemstone pillar that we've theorized, we've tried to guess about before, that they can't quite figure out what it does.
Or at least a portion of the pillar looks like looks like this Fabrial. Right?
There's some sort of similarity, right? They're not maybe the same, but similar. So now I'm starting to question some things. We had kind of just assumed that pillar like powered the city, provided, almost kind of the equivalent of electricity to the city, is kind of where my brain has been thinking that's going to go. But if it's different, if it's a little more, I don't know, I'm not quite sure. But if it has similarities to this Fabrial, that takes it in a very different direction. The other thing that she's reading about or thinking about in this scene is kind of random. Soulcasters. She's like taking notes or just kind of theorizing about soulcasters, and I kind of just jotted this down for later consideration, I'm sure. She just notes that soulcasters are different than other Fabrials, and I wasn't quite sure I had appreciated this before. She explains that now that she can see into Shadesmar, she knows that the spren powering a soulcaster is actually in air quotes, dead, like equivalent to a radiant spren. It's not the more like lower spren that power a lot of their other Fabrials, not more of the more kind of equivalent to animals spren. This is a people spren. This is a fully sentient people equivalent higher spren, but in the kind of dead state that we've seen before, the power soulcaster. So I was thinking immediately to like shard blades. It seems like they're actually more closer to shard blades than they are like the Fabrials that they put in their fireplaces to heat, or they used to pump water. So I jotted that down for future reference, that soulcasters are different.
One thing that stuck out to me, or something I've been thinking about with this, is this isn't a good thing to bring up, because it's like, I'm just saying that this doesn't make sense to me, and I don't know if there's an answer, and that makes me kind of sad. But so last book we saw a crew of our people, specifically Adolin, in Shadesmar, and he was with his sword's spren, who was a Deadeyes, whatever. Yep. Yes. And she didn't do anything other than if you tried to draw her as a shard blade while you're in Shadesmar, she would scream.
Right.
But she really did nothing until the very end. She actually kind of like helps Adolin out, right? She kind of saves his life, which was really cool, and I was kind of waiting for something like that. But I still don't get how our dead spren are what they are in the physical realm. Like, specifically with this and this, like, the shard blades and the soulcaster, like, I don't know. I'd never really thought about that before. It was just kind of understood, like, oh yeah, the shard blades are dead spren. Okay.
Is there a question in here?
How does that, how do dead spren do these things in the physical realm?
I'll Rafo that. There is an answer to your question. I'll say that.
Okay. I'm really happy to know that, actually, because I kind of thought it was just something that was just like a law of the world, and you just kind of accept it. But
right.
I'll throw out my general thought on it. It seems like those types of instances are like a forced version of something that's supposed to happen with a radiant, like the sword with the spren. And what's supposed to happen is the spren and the radiant have a bond where they share and they agree, yep, I need a sword now, I need a spear, I need a shield, I call you, you become that. Whereas the dead spren are doing that same thing, only the spren no longer has any say in it, and it's a forced, you are taking your spren you have in captivity and making it do like what you want to. So now I'm kind of lumping soulcasters into that category somehow. I don't know how that makes sense, but somehow.
No, that does make sense. I'm really glad you mentioned that because it yeah, that makes way more sense. It's like the kind of like dead tool versus like a live assistant, I guess, helper,
Right.
kind of thing. So that's pretty cool.
Do you guys remember? There's a random paragraph in Oathbringer where Teravangian is talking to Dalinar about half shards and luring Spren in, and is that morally okay? We've had this question before, but now that we understand that soulcasters are radiant Spren, we might have to revisit this, because before Dalinar was saying, well, I mean, it's just a heat fabrial, it's just a fire spren, nobody cares, not even the other spren care. But if a fabrial has, you know, a wind spren in it or an ink spren in it, or, you know, whatever, people are going to care, spren are going to care, which ties us into the end of this segment. She's kind of musing on her soulcasters here, and gets an anonymous span read from a span read that was snuck into her ship, and it has a dialogue back and forth with her of, you are a monster, you are a terrible person, stop enslaving Spren. What'd you guys think of this?
So the immediate question is, of course, who is she talking to?
Yep.
Who is on the other end of this? And two ideas immediately popped into my head. One, a spread. I mean, who's going to care about you in capturing Spren? Well, other Spren. So they might be trying to do something about it. The other idea I came up with is a little more wild and outside of the box. It specifically said that the script was almost illegible. It was hard to read, not refined, which to me implied, yeah, either, you know, a Spren who can, you know, barely pick up a pen or isn't used to using this language or something like that. Or what if it's an Alethi male who has just knows enough barely to be able to, you know, scratch out letters that he knows is the right words. And the Alethi male that jumped into my mind was Renarin. We've known Renarin in the past to leave cryptic messages for people, to tell them things like numbers scratched on a wall. So I was wondering if Renarin's taking kind of like a weird tactic here of like, he feels like he can't approach her, Navani, specifically about this. So he's trying to send her like a cryptic message that she'll think is from the Spren or from somebody else, and something along those lines. I'm not sure I haven't quite sold myself on that theory, because the person like calls her a monster. The person is like calling her out and be like, no, you're a terrible person. How dare you do this? That doesn't quite sound like Renarin necessarily, but the method of communication, I could totally see this being Renarin.
Or it could even be somebody that someone she's close to has like relayed the information of what Navani's doing to them, and then they or like, oh, that's really, really terrible, I'm going to confront her about this. And so she doesn't necessarily know exactly who it is, but it could be like they've heard of Navani. So Good thoughts. Anything else before the mildly brief Shallan section? Paul, any guesses on who the span read writer is? Prediction time.
This is a tough one. Honestly, like, I want to throw out something ridiculous, but like I can't. Nothing quite makes sense to me like Renarin does. But like kind of what Elliot was saying. I don't know that I thought too deeply about who this was.
I thought it could be, on my first read, I remember thinking this could be like an unmade or something like that, who views Spren, like the use of Spren, as an atrocity, and just trying to get Navani to stop it. Or someone in that classification, like unmade or like big Spren or whatever. You guys remember that big Spren that Axes observed in the bay? It's like this huge ocean Spren.
Enormous water fountain Spren or whatever. Yeah.
Like
that thing still confuses me, but I lie awake thinking about it, but it's okay.
that one people hypothesize isn't unmade himself, but
okay,
that's a whole nother thread to pull. Yeah, I was just thinking on my first read that this could be like a large sentient Spren somewhere. All right, Shallan and Adolin are on their way back to on their way back to Yurthiru from the war camps, and they are flipping through Ele's journal. And nice of Brandon Sanderson to kind of recap the last couple books for us in this conversation between Shallan and Adolin, because Adolin's like the dumb one here, and Shallan's explaining all the exposition to him. And so Adolin's like, so Ele was a ghost blood, right? And Shallan's like, no, the ghost bloods are after Ele. Ele's the Sons of Honor. And then Adolin's like, oh yeah, that was Amaram, right? And the Sons of Honor are after Shardblades. And she's like, well, no, they're after Yurthiru. And she explains everything and kind of recaps everything for him. So it mentions by name, Ele's notebook, Nalthis with an added A, Scadrial with an added A, and Taldane with a... Is it spelled correctly, or is there a alteration? I don't know. Anyway,
yeah, I'm sure it's spelled correctly, Trevor.
What did you guys think of this?
Like you mentioned in your intro, Paul, I was really interested by this because we're almost in a situation where we, like Paul, you and I, know more about the greater universe than our characters do at this point. So here was a moment of like, they're discovering something that we kind of already know about. These other systems that are out there where we've, read some stories and seen some characters from these worlds. My take on the name spelling was this just seems like something where you heard the name and you wrote down, what you heard. And so it's close, but it's not quite exact.
My interpretation was an Alethi hand is writing this and putting in palindromes.
Trying to make it
as you're writing, just because that's how your alphabet works. So you're adding in vowels to mirror other vowels because that's how your alphabet works. That's how I interpreted it.
That's kind of what I was thinking, Trevor, as well. I was thinking about how every time we see a herald mentioned, it's a different spelling kind of thing. Like there's Yezrian and Yezeraza, and I was kind of assuming it was just a like local kind of writing style and understanding to our people here. So yeah, that was my impression of that.
Just to recap, make sure you guys are on the same page here. Where's Nalthis?
That's Warbreaker.
Correct, Warbreaker.
Right.
Scadrial is Mistborn, and we'll get there. What's on Taldane?
I was trying to remember my Arcanum Unbounded to remember which one this was, and I can't remember. Was that the No, that was the I can't even remember which one.
I know I remember that Scadrial was Mistborn. I think Taldane is.
So that's
Was
the
that
Dark
the
Planet. No, that
Taldane
was
is
Threnodite.
Threnody is the Shade Planet. Taldane is
Yeah.
White Sand.
Okay, that's right. That was a neat story.
And then the one you're missing that we haven't brought up yet is First of the Sun, which our parrots were on.
Mm.
Are you guys beginning to get an inkling of why we stopped for Arcanum Unbounded when we did, so that little drops like this actually mean something to you?
I guess that makes sense. That makes sense. I was kind of like, wow, we're really learning a lot between Oathbringer and Rhythm of War. And I didn't like right now. I'm honestly not thinking that like there will be that much in this book that's like world like universal, you know? I imagine there'll be a lot of like neat like nods and stuff like this. But I am curious on what like what we'll actually see from this book related to like Cosmere things because I feel like it can't go too crazy,
Right.
you know. But I'm also not surprised. I'm gonna use this to mention something else if y'all don't mind. Kind of me transitioning.
Uh-huh.
Um, it's something that I found, and so this is my like, yeah, like I don't think this is gonna be a big deal, but I'm now looking back. I've seen stuff that we've read before, and I'm like, I didn't think that would be a big deal at all, you know. And then I read it again, and I'm like, what the heck? And this isn't anything crazy, but I was flipping through Words of Radiance. And also, I feel like I'm now where Trevor sort of was when we were starting to read this, in that whenever I started this podcast, I told several of my friends, like, oh, y'all should read this book. Y'all should read The Way of Kings. And now they finally are, like 2 years later. And so I have a couple of friends who've been reading. So I've been flipping through old stuff to kind of like talk to them. And one of my friends is in Words of Radiance, and I read uh the epigraph to chapter 50, and it was just about will shapers, and I really wanted to share it because
Yeah.
of Vinley in our book, who we've kind of assumed will be a will shaper.
Yep.
And so the epigraph from that chapter says, "And now, if there was an uncut gem among the Radiants, it was the will shapers. For though enterprising, they were erratic, and Envia wrote of them, capricious, frustrating, unreliable, as taking it for granted that others would agree. This may have been an intolerant view, as often Envia expressed, for this order was said to be the most varied, inconsistent in temperament, save for a general love of adventure, novelty, or oddity." Words of Radiance, Chapter 7, page 1. So it seems like our will shapers. In my head, that title sounds like a very orderly group,
Mm-hmm.
but it sounds like they're going to be kind of sporadic. And so I'm just like thinking now, like everything that I see Vinley do, like how trustable is she going to be? And this is also assuming that she's a will shaper because we haven't really seen any proof. But I'm kind of making that logical jump here. So I thought that was neat, and I wanted to share that with y'all moving forward.
I do like that. That's an interesting glimpse into what we might look out for Venli. When you read that, I was thinking the word kind of in my mind was independent. It sounds like will shapers are kind of the do their thing kind of people.
Make your own way.
Yeah.
Right.
She's
And
definitely
that
in a position where she's going to have to do that.
exactly.
Yeah.
She's kind of off on her own, right? She's kind of in amongst the enemy, but she appears very content with that. She doesn't seem to be, eager to go find the other Radiants and join them necessarily. We haven't seen too much of her yet, so we'll maybe that'll change. But it seems like she's very much kind of a fight against the current sort of a person where she's at.
And some of that reflects in Timber as well, her spren, because Timber is has talked to her and said, I'm not interested in bonding a human because they betrayed us so long ago. So that's why I chose you, because you haven't betrayed us yet. So he's kind of, or she, I don't even remember. I looked it up. I don't remember what timber is. They're carving their own way there. Anything else for chapter 9?
One more thing I will mention on Shallan, and this wasn't completely driven by what we see in this chapter. It kind of builds on what we've seen before in this book. We've already got a little bit of a hint that there's more in Shallan's past, in her history, and we get some more hints here in this chapter. I was gonna read a couple and then spin this into a little bit of a mini theory, or kind of a way I'm thinking this might go.
Yep, sounds good.
She's just talking to Adolin. They're just in the carriage, right? I think they're just riding in like a carriage here. This is in her head. This is just where she's thinking. What he would do if he knew the real her, if he knew all the things she'd actually done. She told him some already about her father and her mother and her life in Yaakov, but not the deepest things, the things she didn't even remember herself. How could she tell him things that were clouded in her own memory? And I'm terrified of this, because we already thought we had the biggest bomb drop on us ever, that not only did she kill her father, we learned she also killed her own mother. And now we learned that there's something more. There's something potentially worse that she's so terrified of in her past, in her history. So I'm racking my brain trying to figure out what the heck could be in her past if she's already killed both of her parents. And I'm realizing, and I think Shallan thinks about this too. I think we've mentioned this before. Shallan and Pattern have a very long history. Very long history. She summons Pattern as a shard blade when she's a child and kills her mother that way.
Yep.
And so I'm starting to wonder, what if something like really big is kind of revolving around Shallan? What if she's a bit of a linchpin for like everything? What if all of this is happening because Shallan bonded Pattern? What if all of this has kind of been dominoes falling after that moment when her as a child created that bond with Pattern? We even got a sense of this, maybe even as far back as Way of Kings, when like Syl and Kaladin were starting to have their initial interactions. They're like, oh, this is going to start happening more and more. This is the start of something. But we've learned Syl and Kaladin were not the first, clearly.
Yeah.
They were potentially by years ago. Shallan and Pattern are already doing their thing. So what if Shallan is the center of all of this? What if somehow she's in the middle of this way more than we think? And I want so badly for like a herald to fit into this somehow. Did Shallan, we've already learned that Shallan has killed a lot of people. Did Shallan kill a herald? Did a herald like pass some sort of ability to her, have some sort of interaction with her? What could Shallan have done that is even more terrible, such that Shallan thinks to herself, no one will ever love me again if they ever hear this? Beyond what she's already shared with Adolin. Like, what could this be?
Before you go, Paul, have I shared the Shallan's mom theory with you guys?
So yes, I don't remember it, but I'm pretty confident you've shared something about Shallan's mom with us.
There's a theory that Shallan's mom is Chanarach, the Dustbringer herald, and she accidentally sends her to Braze when she kills her, and she is who breaks the oath pact. So your line of thought is completely supported by that theory, Elliot.
Yeah, that lines up exactly with what I'm thinking.
Yeah, we've seen our characters who get Spren are usually, or not just get Spren, but kind of move in ideals, like grow in their ideals, are usually met with very serious challenges and trials and things like that. And honestly, Shallan's childhood would bring it on pretty early. I feel like, like so I wouldn't be too surprised if she was the first or like near the first. Um so that'd be crazy. But okay, so also I'm just thinking about this now. With that theory, if Shallan had the shard blade to kill her mom, and her mom wouldn't the Spren be coming back and bonding with people after the desolation is like started? So if that was the herald that started that back, that wouldn't work, right? Maybe I explained that poorly. Does that make sense?
No, I understand, and that's been a running question, and that we don't know the answer to is which comes first, the Knights Radiant returning or the desolation. Like, does the desolation cause the Knights Radiant to come, or does the Knights Radiant coming back cause the desolation? Which one comes first, the chicken or the egg? We don't know yet.
That's a good point. Either way, Shallan does seem to be very important. I am kind of like racking my brain over what could be this big reveal. It honestly makes me nervous from a story writing standpoint because we had that like huge reveal in Words of Radiance with her like killing her parents, and that was a real like honestly very impactful reveal. Like I don't want to say I liked the Shallan flashback chapters because they were very like gruesome and sad and scary and very infuriating, but like liked them as a story element. Like it was very impactful and like filled with like tons of emotion. And so I don't know how much we can keep digging from Shallan. Like right now I'm not that invested. I'm very curious to see what it is, but I'm nervous. I'm like, I don't know how you're gonna go further than what you did. So
Something I do want to bring up. It's a little bit more of a tangent. Elliot, you can keep going if there's something else you want to say.
No, go for it.
I just want to highlight how Shallan as a narrator is, if you think about it for a second, maybe like fairly unreliable for the information she's telling the reader. So if you think about her shard blade back when she was little, as far as we know, ideals, that's what? Ideal 3? And she's 8, 9? And then she goes on the ship and meets Pattern, and Pattern doesn't seem to be developed yet. And I killed my mom, I killed my dad. She's treating those as ideal 2 and 3, right? Or is that 4 and 5? What are we doing here? We have a shard blade when she's 9. Then she says, I killed my mom. That's her, what, 4th ideal? Like in Words of Radiant, like are you guys tracking what I'm getting at here?
yeah,
where is she on this timeline? If she's had 2 ideals and a shard blade back when she was 9, like what's happening?
I mean that's a big question we've kind of had for a while. But didn't we learn somewhere or hear that Lightweavers like aren't the same? They don't have like 5 ideals, and it's just kind of like you're kind of just chilling. Like I don't know. I always thought there wasn't like distinct depths. Like Windrunner feels like a very finite. In Skybreaker, right? We've seen very finite, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's
Right.
specific like words or sentiments with it. And with Lightweaver, I feel like it's just been this like I don't know.
Vibing.
You kind of keep lying and doing your thing, and it works out.
Yeah.
All Lightweavers know how to do.
Genuine, I don't know.
Lie.
The other possibly crazy explanation, what if Shallan can go backwards on the scale? Because she's got some mental, I'll say weirdness going on, which is kind of her general state, right? We've been introduced recently to the idea that what if she has memory loss? What if she actually doesn't remember? And she says this, right? She doesn't even remember in that quote I just read some of what her past secrets are because she can bury them. She can kind of just almost isolate them from her mind, almost intentionally forget them, like completely forget them. What if she like can speak a truth to achieve a level, but then if she forgets that truth or chooses to forget that, does that drop her back? Does she go backwards in the line there perhaps? So maybe she was third ideal when she was 9 and has gone backwards, and Pattern has equivalently gone backwards as well. And so when she meets Pattern on the ship, he has regressed from where he used to be, and now he is kind of relearning how to talk because he was injured or repressed or whatever by Shallan. Maybe that's what's going on.
I'm actually totally on board with that because, yeah, what if Shallan effectively kills Pattern by not thinking about him for 5 years and suppresses that memory, unbonds Pattern basically, and then revives him once she starts understanding, oh, there's other radiance in the world. I'm allowed to be this. I'll bring him back. I'm allowed to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that.
I agree. My first thought, which I think you can kind of like, it doesn't fully disprove this, but my thought was with Teft, because we found out later that he had a spren who had just been hanging out on, like, was it the second ideal? And then he says his third,
Yep.
right? And just kind of like reignited there. But like that's what I was thinking about with this conversation of like Taft left his spren kind of just by the wayside for like a while, like a good while, and it was just like the spren was still like sentient, just very weak and sad.
Yeah.
And I was thinking it would be maybe more like that than like completely regressing, but I don't know timeline of that, how long. I mean, I know we've never seen Teft like lash or do anything like that. Sorry. But that was my thought with that. Like that in my head, that doesn't quite make sense. But also, Cryptics and Honor Spring could be different. There's a lot of things there.
Or even like Shallan seems different. Maybe this theory could even just apply to Shallan, not even like other Lightweavers. Like the fact that Shallan can intentionally bury something so deep in her mind that she can't even remember it. Like maybe this is all theory, right? At least from Paul and I's perspective, is that she's intentionally forgetting it. She's intentionally burying it, as opposed to maybe like an ignoring. Like maybe if that spreads there and Teft is just ignoring it, maybe that doesn't cause something like this that we're theorizing about.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
So I realize that most of our conversation hasn't actually been about our chapters, but I have one more thing.
I'm here for it. Keep going.
I remember. I could be remembering this wrongly. This is going off of my memory of the early flashback chapters with Shallan. That she's like in her room or whatever, and there's like this like glow from a box.
Yep.
And I always remember that, and we were like, oh, it's like her spren or whatever. But was that a Dawn Shard? Because we saw the glowing stuff from the painting in Dawn Shard, and she was Risen kind of like absorbs that. Did Shallan absorb a Dawn Shard? Is that why she's so special?
Plausible.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard that theory, but
Really? I thought
Really?
that was low hanging fruit.
no, I don't know if I've ever heard that before.
I have to go back and read that now. That's what I'm gonna do after this.
Something we could look for
search for
to maybe-
descriptors.
I like this theory in that it falls in plausible in my mind. I think one thing we could look out to maybe back this up is if we get to see Risen again. If we get to see her and she all of a sudden is starting to deal with like mental stuff that she wasn't before.
If
that
she's
could-
now 4 people instead of 1.
And
Then
maybe
we'll
not
know.
quite that extreme.
Ah,
That would be
dang
pretty
it.
obvious, right? But even something more subtle would lean me to, in that direction of your theory there, Paul. If Risen all of a sudden is dealing with doubts or depression or some sort of mental struggle she was not dealing with before, could the presence of the Dawn Shard in her be playing into that? And then you could apply that to Shallan. That would be some good evidence. So we need to meet Risen again and see how she's doing.
I agree, and I feel like I'm taking Trevor's seat right now. Of like every time a fun theory is thrown out, he's like, "Well, actually, there's this which you didn't think about." But in my head, so Risen's kind of struggle has always been with like being paralyzed, like crippled now, not being able to walk, and I feel like if there is that, it will just like magnify that. I don't imagine that there would be like big other things. That, and she had kind of like the little like leadership, like, do I really own this ship? Like all this stuff like that. Does my crew respect me? I feel like we'd see the same problems, and it would be really hard to distinguish whether that's like a notable thing comparable to Shallan, because they kind of have their own things that they dwell on or like are recurring.
True.
So it'd be hard. But I'm definitely gonna go read and see about the glowing book, or I don't know if it was that, a book or a closet or something.
It's a safe behind a painting, I think. There's like there's like a tapestry
behind
on the
painting.
Wall. The painting? No. I think it's a tapestry hanging on the wall, and it's like a hidden like compartment.